All right. Almost 2,000 years ago, something happened that changed the entire course of history. It wasn't an external world event. It wasn't a world war. It wasn't some conqueror that took over land or some scientific discovery, even, new technology that was discovered that changed everything. No, it was an internal force that changed the course of human development. And in fact, the course of all of reality. And that is the writing of the book of Zohar. A book that is clouded in mystery. It has so many misconceptions surrounding it. Its history, the book itself, how to use it, what to do with it, who it's written for, why it was written, and so on. So in today's session, History of the Zohar, we're going to take you through a journey, even from before the Zohar was written, throughout the writing of the Zohar, who wrote it, where, what are the different approaches to the writing of the Zohar, and we're going to go through 2,000 years of history, and hopefully we'll be able to delve deep into this really interesting and fascinating phenomena called the Book of Zohar. So let's get into it. Okay, hello everyone. So I'm Gil Shir. Today in Kabbalah Explained Simply, we're going to talk about the history of the Zohar. So please write down in the chat. First of all, say hi, introduce yourself, maybe where you're from. That'd be awesome to see and hear. It's always nice to see how we have students from all around the world who are wanting to know more about the origin of this really fascinating, interesting topic. So let's see the diversity we have here. So please write in the chat, say where you're from, and let's dive right into it. So, history of the Zohar. All right. Let's get ready for a journey that starts off with a rabbi, a person called Akiva. You might know him as Rabbi Akiva. He lived almost 2,000 years ago, around 50 CE. So this is the beginning of our timeline. Now, you might be wondering why I'm even talking about Rabbi Akiva. We said that we're doing the history of the Zohar, so we'll see in a second. So a little bit about Rabbi Akiva. So he lived about 2,000 years ago. He was a great Kabbalist. Actually, he was a proselyte as well. He converted to Judaism. He only really, there's a few different versions of his history, but the most accepted one is that he really started studying Torah, Kabbalah at the age of 40. And until then, he was a simple man, not a great Kabbalist, a great rabbi. So that's interesting to see, that it's possible at any age to dive into this wisdom. It's written about him on Midrash Rabbah that he attained the secrets of the Torah that were not even revealed to Moses. That's how great he was. That's what a huge Kabbalist he was. He's also called Tzaddik Yesod Olam, which the translation means the righteous, the foundation of the world. The translation isn't that great, but it really means like he's the righteous to such an extent that he himself is a foundation of the world. That's the level of his righteousness, you could say. Rabbi Akiva was also the one who organized a huge amount of materials into what's called the halacha today. He wrote the interpretation of the Torah based on every letter and word in the Torah having an internal meaning. So he was a Kabbalist. He knew that every single word written in these scriptures are really referring to a spiritual meaning. He's also the one who discovered, I want to say, the golden rule, as you might know it. Love thy friend, love thy neighbor. It's widely known as the golden rule. I say discovered because he found that is a law of nature. And he says this is a great law in the Torah, a general law. In Hebrew, it's klal, which means kolel, inclusive. So it's an inclusive law that includes everything in it. Love thy neighbor. So this is Rabbi Akiva. Now, Rabbi Akiva's story doesn't end well, at least not externally. He lived in very challenging times. He was captured and tortured to death by the Romans. That was the end of his life in this world. He did have 24,000 students at a certain point, which died from a plague. And it is written that they died because they did not follow the law of love thy friend as thyself. His law, in fact. And it's written that that's why they died. So almost all of his students died in a very short period of time, in a matter of months. But 5 of his students survived. And who are these students? So Rabbi Meir, whose teaching is the foundation of the 6 volumes of the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Elazar ben Shamoa, all of which had influences at the time, were considered great Kabbalists, and all had influences in the Mishnah as well. And finally, his 5th student, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, aka Rashbi. So those were his 5 students. So this brings us to go a little bit deeper into his 5th student, Rashbi. So Rashbi was his most outstanding student. He's one generation below him. He lived around 80 CE, so not long after Rabbi Akiva, of course. So this is Rashbi. And Rashbi is the author, Rashbi and his students, in fact, are the authors of the book of Zohar. They wrote it in a cave in the north of Israel, a few miles from Mount Meron. So now, I'm sure, some of you are saying, wait a minute, but wasn't the Zohar written by De Leon? Scholars say it was written by multiple authors over periods of hundreds of years, and Gershom Shalom says it was written by De Leon in the 13th century, etc., etc. So let's talk about that a little bit. I'm not disregarding any of these approaches. Let's talk about them. All right. So let's see what's happening here. So let's see a few opinions on who wrote the Zohar. So opinion number 1. And there's no hard evidence for any of them. That's why I'm saying it's opinions. Well, you could say some of it is based on certain findings, but there aren't any hard facts that lead us to a definite conclusion. So one of the opinions, one of the approaches, led by Gershon Shalom and his student, Yeshaya Tishbi, this is in the previous century. Basically, they did a lot of research, and what they found was that it was written in the 13th century by Rabbi Moshe de Leon. That's one opinion. Maybe 20 years ago, this was the most widely accepted opinion. Today, it's not so much. So that's one of the opinions. Another one is that it was written over hundreds of years, and it was contributed by many authors. So many different people added parts to the Zohar over hundreds or even thousands of years. That's another opinion, another approach. And finally, the third one is that it was written by Rashbi and his 9 students. And that's been, this approach has been around probably for the longest. The first 2 are more recent, from the last 100 years, I would say. And the fact that it was written by Rashbi, that's been said for hundreds of years by Kabbalists and some scholars as well. So these are the 3 opinions. Now let's dive a little bit into them. So another researcher, scholar, Rabbi Menachem Kasher, who is actually an expert on Jewish scriptures, and he's also a winner of the Israel Prize, which is kind of like the Israeli Nobel Prize. He's also the 2-time winner of the Rabbi Kook Prize, which is a prestigious prize for Jewish literature. And what he said, the reason why I'm telling you about all of his accreditation is just so you know that it's not some kind of side researcher. He's a leading name. And what he said is that Gershon Shalom and his students were mistaken. That's the bottom line. To quote him, Gershon Shalom and his students based their views on an incorrect foundation. No doubt that it was not written by De Leon. I'm not saying he's right, they're right. I'm just saying that there are different opinions from leading researchers in the field. And they're saying contradicting things. 25th century scholars are not so certain about the author anymore. Not as certain as Gershon Shalom was. with these new findings, with these new researchers claiming otherwise, like Menachem Kasher. So 21st century scholars are not that certain about the author. Okay, so that's just to take into account. Now, regarding the second opinion, that it was written over hundreds of years and many authors contributed. So let's explore that a little bit as well. Now, the reason why they claim that is because they say that there are different writing styles in the Zohar, that those writing styles are attributed to different periods of time. So they saw, a block of text, they say, okay, this writing style is suited to Spain in 15th century, and then they see in a different book, they see, okay, this writing style is ascribed to wherever, Italy in 14th century. And because they see different styles and different pieces of information that are suited to different times in the historical timeline, that's their conclusion. In my opinion, that is not the correct conclusion, and I'll tell you why. In Vayikra, in the Zohar, there are scientific facts that were not known when they were written. They could not have been known. Here it is in Aramaic. This is the authentic Zohar text. Obviously, I'm not going to read it in Aramaic. I'm going to show it to you in English, but if you want to look into it, here it is. So in English, it says this: the whole world revolves in a circle like a ball. Some are above and some are below. So already the Zohar here is talking about gravity, because how can you be above and below if you're not, in a way, glued to the globe, right? The people all around the earth stand opposite each other, and the 7 parts in the ball are the 7 lands. So already here, the Zohar is saying that there are 7 continents. But Australia was discovered in the 17th century, and Antarctica was discovered in the 19th century. So how could they know that there were 7 continents? Not only that, it says, and all the people in the 6 lands. So the authors knew that there were no human beings on Antarctica, and on the other continents there were human beings. If it's the Indians or the Aborigines, etc., they differ in their appearances according to the different air in each place. So the Zohar here is already saying that there are differences in human appearance due to climate. And they continue and they persist as the rest of the people. Hence, there is a place in the world that when it shines for those on this side of the planet, it's dark for those on that side of the planet. It turns out that it is day for these and night for those. So already the Zohar is talking about the Earth's rotation, which is a discovery of the 20th century. And there is a place in the world which is all day and there is night in it only for 1 short hour, talking about the poles. So this is authentic text from the Zohar, and like I said, you can look it up. You can look at the Aramaic as well if you want to double check. So why did I show you this text? Because, in my opinion at least, and tell me if you agree, claiming that the Zohar was written over a period of hundreds of years because the text has different styles would be like claiming the Zohar was written in the 20th century because it's referring to scientific discoveries that could not have been known back then. So that also makes sense, because if you look at the Zohar with corporeal eyes, then you reach corporeal conclusions. But the thing is, the spiritual worlds don't always fit our corporeal perceptions, which are viewed from within our will to receive, right? From within our, you could say, corrupted view of reality, a reality that's driven by ego. So that's up to you to decide, but I'll tell you the truth, it doesn't really matter. Kabbalists were never too worried about this question. For them, it was always clear for hundreds of years, even thousands of years, that the Zohar was written by Rashbi and by his students. And Baal HaSulam says the following. He says, you can evidently see that Kabbalist Rabbi Moshe de Leon, who was the last to possess it and by whom it was revealed to the world, did not understand 1 word of it. Since in those books where he introduces pieces from the book of Zohar, it is evident that he did not understand the words at all, as he interpreted it according to the language of the Bible. He completely confused the understanding, although he himself had a wonderful attainment, as his compositions demonstrate. So Baal HaSulam, greatest Kabbalist of our times, you could say, and this is what he writes. To him it's very clear as well that it's not Rabbi Moshe de Leon, but that it is Rashbi. So with that, we'll put aside this discussion. You can really believe what you want. It doesn't really matter. The main thing is what Kabbalists say the Zohar was written for, and when it was written for, and what we can do with the book of Zohar. So those are the main things. So I wouldn't get too pulled down by any of the facts, plus I wouldn't be too surprised if, in the near future, scientists will discover new things that will shed light, on the fact that the author was in fact Rashbi. And that's fine, because in science, whatever we know now is most likely in fact wrong. And that's how it's been for all of scientific history. Whatever they thought was correct at one point of time, later on they found that's either inaccurate or completely incorrect. So that's fine, no hard feelings for the academia, they're doing their job. But here, we're teaching the history of the Zohar according to the authentic wisdom of Kabbalah and according to Kabbalists. So that's our approach, and let's move forward. So we're here on the timeline. We have Rabbi Akiva, Rashbi, and then we have the Zohar written approximately in the 2nd century. Obviously, Rashbi wrote it when he was a little bit older, not when he was born, so that's already moving us into the 2nd century. Okay, cool. I can already see that we have a lot of questions. I will get to them. There's quite a lot of content today. I want to make sure that we cover it all, but I will get to questions as well. Okay, so let's move forward. Okay, so we spoke a little bit, just to kind of recap. So we spoke about Rabbi Akiva, who was the teacher of Rashbi. We spoke about Rashbi, and who is the author of the book of Zohar. We spoke about different scientific academic approaches to the author of the book of Zohar, and now we are continuing to the actual writing of the book of Zohar. So we're over here, Rashbi and the writing of the Zohar. So Rashbi says this: the holy matters that I did not reveal until now, I wish to reveal in the presence of the Shekhinah, divinity, so that no one will say that I left the world without fulfilling my task, and that I concealed these secrets in my heart until now, so that they would come with me to the world to come. I will present them to you. Rabbi Abba shall write, and Rabbi Elazar, my son, will review them, and the remaining circle of disciples must whisper them in their hearts. This is Rashbi about writing the Zohar. Beautiful. Let's keep going. So, as you might have understood, what Rashbi wrote here is how the Zohar was written, in fact, and it was written by what's called Idra Rabbah, which is the Great Assembly. That's what Idra Rabbah means. And this Great Assembly was the assembly of Rashbi and his 9 students. Okay, so who are these 9 students? I think they deserve to be mentioned. So Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, that's his son. That's who he said that you saw before here. He said, my son will review them. That's Rabbi Elazar. And Rabbi Abba shall write. And Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi Bar Yaakov, Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Yechezkiah Bar Rav, Rabbi Chia, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Isa. Now, all of these we call them rabbis, but in fact, in the past, a rabbi was in fact a Kabbalist. Rabbi comes from the word Rav, which means great. It's not someone who's accredited by some government, some ministry of religion or something. No, that's not what a Rav is. I mean, today maybe it is, but in the past, a Rav was someone who was great in this method, in this wisdom. And therefore, in the past, anyone who was a Rav was in fact a Kabbalist. So Rashbi and a group of 9 Kabbalists, his students, which are sometimes called also his friends, they sat together in a cave not far from Mount Meron, together writing the book of Zohar. Okay, so what did they write about? They wrote about spiritual attainment and what they attained and what's needed, and that is what is needed in order to understand what is written. So if you open the Zohar, some of it seems like, you could understand it. It talks maybe about nature, even about mountains or about people, and you might think it's clear, but it is not. In fact, it speaks only of spiritual matters. The reason why it is partly might seem clear is because it's All Kabbalistic text is written according to the language of root and branch. So any word that Kabbalists use in texts like these, they're actually a branch which has a spiritual root. And the reason why they use it is because they have no other way to communicate in this world. So let's say two Kabbalists want to write and talk about spirituality. There are no words for spirituality in our world, but there is only a language of roots and branches. So every root in this world points to every branch in this world points to a spiritual root. For example, land in this world, its spiritual root means desire. So to work the land, which is written about in the Talmud, etc., means to work the desire. That's just an example. So spiritual attainment is needed to understand what is written. Now, they describe states of becoming one soul, and this soul is the soul of Adam, which is the collective soul that was formed in the world of Atzilut. Now, Rashbi's teacher, Rabbi Akiva, he revealed the golden rule, love thy friend as thyself. And it's not by coincidence that Rashbi's teacher, that was his main thing, love thy friend as thyself. And it's also not a coincidence that the book was written by a group of people. And in fact, not just a group, they were written by 10 people, corresponding the tree of life, the 10 Sefirot. Keter, Chochmah, Binah, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchut. Each one of those authors corresponded to Sphira. Together, they were as one. They were a complete structure in equivalence of form with the soul of Adam HaRishon, with the 10 Sefirot, and they really wrote the Zohar from that state, from a state of complete connection. Now, it is actually interesting. You might think, okay, they were great Kabbalists, they were lovey-dovey, connecting to one another, but it wasn't that easy. Let's take a look at what's written in the Zohar. So it's written this: Behold, how good and how pleasant it is for the brothers to also sit together. Talking about the authors of the Zohar. They wrote about themselves. These are the friends as they sit together and are not separated from each other. At first, they seem like people at war, wishing to kill one another. Then they return to being in brotherly love. So it's talking about Kabbalists here who have spiritual attainment, and at first they seem like they're at war. Okay, the Creator says about them, Behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brothers to also sit together. The word also comes to include the Shekhinah, divinity, with them. Moreover, the Creator listens to their words, and He has contentment and delights with them. So this beautiful text is from Zohar for all, from the portion of Achrimot. So it's pretty incredible to think of these group of Kabbalists who were sitting together in a cave, writing the book of Zohar, and what they were in fact doing, they were connecting above their hatred. And this connection, it wasn't by coincidence, it wasn't that they were in a bad mood. This whole structure of being first in hatred and then rising above, connecting above the hatred, that overcoming of theirs is like a resistance in an electrical circuit. That's what enables the current to flow, the light to flow. So they experienced ascents, descents, and all kinds of emotions in their writings as one experiences in their spiritual development. And the book of Zohar allegorically describes all of these forms of connection between a group of people, an individual that wants to connect to a group of people to be as one man in one heart. Okay, so I'm going to take a quick look at the questions. I might not answer them, but I always still want to take a look because I really do want to move forward. We have 2,000 years of history to cover, so let's cover some history. Okay, I see a lot of inspiration and a lot of comments. That's great. I actually have a questions document, so let me grab it open and let's see. Okay, Could it be, Patricia is asking, could it be the spirit of Adam Kadmon who spoke the Zohar into their hearts? It's not exactly the spirit of Adam Kadmon, but it is, you could say, it's sometimes referred to as the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is simply when a person develops this spiritual vessel. Through that, it's like a radio transmitter that can pick up radio waves in the room. So a spiritual tool, which is called a kli, can pick up spiritual waves. And you could say that these forces spoke into their hearts in a way. So yes, everything they wrote was from their attainment of these forces. Okay, so let's see what else. There are all kinds of versions of the Zohar. I can't talk about the authenticity of them. I can only say that the version that we're translating now is guaranteed to be authentic. We have quite a few of the content of it already translated, and it can be found on Kabbalamedia.info. If Linda or Rachel, if you can post a link to the Zohar part in Kabbalah Media, that would be great. To the actual Zohar text there, to the download the Zohar part there on Kabbalah Media. So please do. David's asking, why is it important to know who wrote it? You're right. That's what I said before. It really isn't that important, but it's interesting for a lot of people. So that's why we spoke about it a little bit. The nickname Rashbi by Lyndon, it's an acronym for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. In short, Rashbi. Okay, let's see what else. Is the Zohar of the Middle Ages a reincarnation of the Zohar of the first century? I wouldn't say an incarnation. It is in fact the same Zohar, and we're going to talk about how it was concealed and revealed, so we will talk about that right now. So that was just a quick round of questions, and we will get back to that sooner, I promise. Okay, so let's continue on this fascinating journey through the history of this incredible book. All right, so they wrote it, Rashbi and his students, from these beautiful states they experienced, and then the book disappeared. Now, first of all, it was concealed not only in its physical form that the book was hidden, but also the writings of it were concealing the inner forces in it. So Rabbi Abba, the reason why Rashbi said, and Rabbi Abba will write, you could say, wait a minute, but anyone can write. No, he didn't just write, hear and write. He wrote it, he did the coding. He was the, you could say, head of programming, I don't know, chief coder. That's Rabbi Abba. He heard everything and he wrote it in a coded language so that it will not be able to be misused. Supernatural descriptions and allegories, that's the way Rabbi Abba wrote it. They conceal in them the inner forces that are in this book. Now, the book was also physically hidden in the cave near Mount Meron, and it was waiting for the right time to be revealed. So back to the timeline. So Zohar was written in the 2nd century, and from the 2nd to the 10th century, the Zohar was hidden. It was concealed. It was not found. No one knew where it was. No one even knew about it, that it existed. It's as if it didn't exist. It was gone. Okay. And then what happened? So, Rabbi Avraham Azulai, in the introduction to Or Chochmah, says the following. He says this: it was said that the book of Zohar was concealed in a cave in Meron, and an Arab man had found it and sold it to the merchants in the Upper Galilee. Then a sage from the west came across a few pages from it, and went and collected all the pages from all the merchants, as well as looked in the trash piles. He found that the merchants had been using them to envelope spices. He made his major findings in one of the cities of the west called Tudna, and it may also be that the sage from the west is the one who had led him to his city. So it's like this book, just imagine, for a second, being those pages, right? And what they went through, and they were hidden, and they were written in the cave, and then they were concealed, and they found their way. It's like they have a life of their own with a destiny. So in the 10th century, this took place. That excerpt that we just read of this that it was found in the market, etc. So this took place approximately in the 10th century, where parts of it were found. So, okay, so we saw that. Now it was found by someone that knew their actual value, found in the trash, etc. We talked about this. Okay. So the next steps in the book's history are actually unknown. There was a period of hundreds of years when no one knows what exactly happened to the book and where it was and what took place with it. So it was revealed and concealed, popping up here and disappearing again, and popping up again and disappearing again. And for another 300 years, it was again concealed. So let's take a quick pause. Let's watch a clip. Now, this clip is not a historical clip, so don't treat it like a history. It's just a fun, you could say, concept that gives an idea of what this book went through. So, enjoy. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed it. It was actually made for a convention, for a World Kabbalah convention we held a few years ago, and it was a convention themed around the book of Zohar, so it was kind of showing how the Zohar was leading to being revealed in the masses. In fact, it is. We'll talk about that soon. Okay, so let's go back to finding the book. So we are here. right? So as we said, it was revealed, concealed in all kinds of places. And it finally appeared in Spain in the house of Rabbi Moshe de Leon, who's the same Kabbalist that some of the researchers think he wrote the Zohar, because that's where it was found in the 13th century. So that's where it was discovered. 13th century, it appears in Rabbi Moshe de Leon's house. And it was discovered because after he died, his wife, who needed finances, she sold the book, at least parts of it. So that's how the book was revealed. Now, what happened after that, it's clouded in mysteries and mysticism and all kinds of stories about how the book kind of went around from then. A few hundred years later, there already started mass production, mass printing of the Book of Zohar. Also, print became more common and easier and cheaper. And in the 16th century, it becomes spreading more. It could already be found in many, many libraries across Europe. So the 16th century is the beginning of when it started spreading massively. Now, interestingly, only about 5% of the original writings of the Zohar were recovered, because the Zohar was written covering the Torah, the Tanakh, the Torah, the Nevi'im, the prophets, and the Ketuvim, the writings, which I don't know how many books it is, but it's many, many books. And only the Zohar on the first part of the Torah, 5 books, only those writings were in fact found. So it's estimated that only 5% of the actual writings of the Zohar were found. And it's written, and it's just funny, so I'll read it, that if the Zohar's original writings were put on a camel, there would not be room for anything else on the camel. That's what I read in one of the texts. I guess it was written a while ago when things were measured according to how they can be put on camels. Okay, now, the Book of Zohar, although it was written almost 2,000 years ago, it wasn't written for that time. And obviously it wasn't, otherwise the writers wouldn't have hid it. They would have spread it. But no, they hid it. They put it in a cave and they hid the book. So it was not written for that time, that's certain. So the question is, when was it written for? Well, in fact, it was written for our time today. Why is that? Because reading in the Book of Zohar, it connects us to that system that the Zohar was written from. So the Zohar is written from a point of connection, from equivalence of form with the higher spiritual forces. And by reading the Zohar without even understanding what we read, without knowing the internal spiritual meaning of it, but just by connecting to the text and wanting to read it, wanting to know the state it's written from, that attracts a spiritual light that helps us rise above hatred and separation. It's a light that brings love, and love covers all crimes. I want to show you another clip from a beautiful course that we have on KabU, a course called Enter the Zohar. It's only 3 minutes of the first lesson, but it's, let's watch it and then maybe I'll tell you a little bit more about it. So, wait a minute, that's the wrong clip. My mistake. Here it is. Enter the Zohar intro. Okay. That's the one. So let's take a look at it, and I'll explain afterwards a little bit more about it.
Hi everyone. Welcome to the virtual video course, Enter the Zohar. I'm Wellman. I'll be your professor for the duration. This is not your average course, and this is not your average book. If you're here because you feel, you think, you wish there was something more to life, you're in the right place. If you're starting to sense alienation between you and other people, between you and the environment, within your family, between you and what used to satisfy you, perfect. If you're scared that nobody has a clue about how to handle the floods, the hurricanes, the oil spills, the wars, and the hatred, and on and on and on, that's why we're here. There's a book. It's titled The Book of Radiance. That's in English. In Hebrew, it's called Sefer HaZohar. It's 2,000 years old, and get this. It was written specifically for this time, for the first generation that would one day wake up in a cold sweat and realize that the entire world is connected. We're one living, breathing whole. Pinch yourself. You're alive. You made it. You're a bona fide first-generation member. You made it. It's time to open up this book and shine some of its radiance on the system that's connecting us and how it works. We're not going to need pencils or notebooks, just an open mind, and for those of you fortunate enough to have one, please open up your heart. What is the Book of Zohar? Why is it important to us now? And how is it going to help us? Let's cut to the chase. Here's what we know. For centuries, the Zohar has been considered to be the most important, powerful book of Western mysticism, said to hold the secrets of the universe and all of the heavenly realms. Mapping the worlds of angels, demons, and celestial beings, is filled with fantastical parables, odd references, and strange stories extracted from the Torah, the Bible, on which it comments, pointing to a hidden code, which if properly understood unlocks the secrets of life itself. Yes, a very mysterious work indeed, sure. Because it's mysterious, it's raised suspicions in some who are afraid its content and purpose are far more nefarious. It's the world's first occult conspiracy, a dark cabal. Hidden instructions on how to control the world, a source of power to the secret societies, the Masons, the Jews, the Vatican, who manipulate political, economic, and social structures, seducing the masses with childish biblical fantasies in order to enslave us so they can keep their royal lifestyles intact and prevent us from accessing the meaning and purpose of life. So, to some it's a sacred mystical force beyond understanding to be respected and revered, and to others it's a not so understood power to be used by some for their own deepest, darkest aims. They're both right. They both don't understand it, and that's how your brain sees it, because we don't understand anything about how nature works in people. We know a little bit about the laws of quantum physics, astrophysics, biology, geology, but as far as our place goes in the system, our desires, our emotions, our connections, how it works with that, I mean, look at your lives. Look at the world. I don't think so. But both are right to believe it contains something great about the purpose and meaning of our lives, and it's hidden from us. So let's just put all of our assumptions and fears on hold. Let's start from there.
Okay, so that's a course called, as you guessed, Enter the Zohar, a course that we have as part of our KabU membership, which if you're interested in learning and taking this course and many, many other courses, then you can check out the links in the description below and probably now in the chats. Rachel and Linda and Ruth will post the links now, so you can check them out. It really is an amazing course, and on KabU we host it with many other materials around it, with summaries and links to texts and Q&A with our instructors. So you can find all of that in KabU. And I'm talking about this. This is the link that you'll find, so you'll be able to see what's in it. So there's, about the hidden language of the Zohar, about how to read the Zohar, a little bit about the history of the Zohar, about how it talks about a single law of reality, reveals the soul, and opening the Zohar and tips for it, etc. So really, if you're interested in the Zohar, it is a beautiful, beautiful course, and it's part of the KabU membership, which you can join if you want, in the links, as I mentioned. So, the Zohar, for our time, specifically because it holds in it a force that can correct everything that's broken in the world, but it was missing something. It was missing to be more accessible to humanity today. And here comes Baal HaSulam, who added an interpretation to the book of Zohar. So we're continuing kind of the history of the book, and this is very notable because this is what made the Zohar suited to our time today. And in 1953, Baal HaSulam, he finished writing the interpretation to the book of Zohar. So that includes the complete translation of the original text that was written in Aramaic and all 22 volumes of it. So we're talking in the timeline, and we're looking here, the 20th century, the Sulam was written, and Sulam, in fact, means ladder in Hebrew. And that's also his name, Baal HaSulam, and it's also it's not his name, it's his nickname, because he built a ladder to the spiritual world, and the interpretation of the Zohar is also called Pirush HaSulam, the interpretation of the Sulam, because it is also a ladder to what the Kabbalists intended when they wrote the book. And what Baal HaSulam did, he is a Kabbalist in our generation, and therefore only he was able to adapt it to the state of the souls today. It's the only commentary that's complete in the approach to interpreting the Zohar and doing it correctly, not treating it as kind of a moral book, but treating it as what it is, a book written only about the spiritual world and nothing else, and how we can reach them as well. So Rav Baruch Ashlag wrote about this. Baal HaSulam made it so that if an ordinary person were to walk in his path, he would be able to discover the Creator. How? By climbing this ladder that he made, and that's why he's called Baal HaSulam. And it's also said about Baal HaSulam, a godly sage of great understanding, has come a sacred treasure, and the Spirit of the Lord was upon him to compose the sacred book, to the truth of the Torah and in true foundations. Happy is the woman who bore him. So this beautiful quote is by Rav Kook, which I'm sure many of you might know. He's also a great Rav, a great Kabbalist from the previous century, and he had huge appreciation for Baal HaSulam. And many more Kabbalists write about Baal HaSulam. Here's another quote which you can read later if you'd like, and another one all talking about the greatness of Baal HaSulam. The reason why I brought it here is so that you understand that Baal HaSulam isn't just another interpretation of the Zohar, it is the interpretation suited for our time today. So, where were we? So the Zohar, as we mentioned, as we saw in the clip, in the video, and as Baal HaSulam wrote and many Kabbalists, it was written for our time. The Kabbalists back then wrote it for our time today, for the 21st century. So that's the end of the timeline. The Zohar, the history of the Zohar almost 2,000 years ago was written precisely for our time now, to be revealed to the world, to cure everything that's broken. This book is a book that holds in it immense power. It holds in it the key to all that is painful in reality. And you don't need to do much with it. You don't need to even understand it. That definitely should not be your goal, to understand it. Your goal should be to read the Zohar with the intention to connect to its sources. So we have a few minutes left, and in that time I would like us to taste it, because I know the topic is the history of the Zohar, but really it's not a history lesson. All of this is actually leading us to the fact that the Zohar is written for us, for now, for our time. So we can't end this session without having a small taste of it, and in order to taste it, let's just have some guidelines of how we want to taste it. So a few things to take into account. By the way, I did a whole session on how to read the book of Zohar, so you can check it out. The links will be pasted now in the chat. It's the one called the Zohar, not the Zohar reading, the Zohar. So if you want to know more about how to approach the book of Zohar, how to get the most out of it, then I highly recommend you watch that session called the Zohar. If then you want to actually do some reading, then I recommend you watch another video called Zohar Reading, obviously. So that will also be posted in the links, both in the comments below and also in the chat. So, how to read the Zohar. Guideline number 1, the heart understands. Don't study with your intellect, just connect to it with your heart. Man is a small world. Interpret the words correctly. Don't treat them as words of this world, but treat them as words that describe the spiritual realm. And even better, treat them as words that you don't understand. Number 3, seek the light that reforms. When you connect to the text, when you don't study with your intellect, then what do you study with? With your heart, and with the intention to connect to that light, that this light will attract it and us and will be lifted by it. So that's also the 4th guideline. Everything depends on the desire. So that's really what we need to constantly awaken, our desire. And most importantly, as one man in one heart, connection is the key. That is how they wrote the Zohar, and that's how we need to connect to it. So the fact that we have a few hundred of people now watching on different social media platforms, and the fact that we're going to have thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people who are going to watch this not live, it doesn't matter when. We're all connecting right now to a point in spirituality that's above time and above space. So let's open our hearts and let's read. And thank you to Emmy for selecting these excerpts and for preparing this whole formatting this presentation. So thanks, Emmy. Okay, so 1920 from Bamidbar. It is written, out of Zion, the perfection of beauty, God appeared. Appeared means illuminates. When he illuminates to all the worlds. And when this light, blessing and life awakens, everything is in unity, in zivug. And all is in love. All is in perfection. And then it is peace for all, peace for above and of below. As it is written, peace be within your walls and prosperity within your palaces. Beautiful. That's Zohar from portion Bamidbar in the desert. Should we do another one? Let's do another one. So again, don't worry about understanding or interpreting the words. Don't worry about Hebrew in this. Just connect with your heart. Seek the light that is in this text. And let's do it, all of us together, no matter where we are and no matter when we are. Vayikra, item 342. One who makes a request of the king must unite the holy name in his will from below upwards, from Malchut to Keter, and from above downwards. From Keter to Malchut, uniting everything in one unification, in Ein Sof, and in this unification, he will include his plea. Who is so wise as to make his pleas like King David's, who was keeping the king's door? He was a Merkava to Malchut, which is called the king's door. So it is, and this is why the Torah teaches us the ways of the Holy King. So we will know how to follow him. As it is written, after the Lord your God shall you walk. That's from Zohar portion Vayikra, which is the Lord called. So, with that, we have concluded 2,000 years of history of the most important book of all times, a book that has in it the power to lift us individually, collectively, as a people, as humanity. So, I know there are many more questions. Unfortunately, our time is up. We're going to be moving on now to our KabU Zoom session. So our KabU students, I'll see you in a few minutes. And anyone who wants to join KabU will also be able to join our weekly KabU Zoom sessions, which are always at this time, right after the YouTube, Facebook, etc. sessions. And if you have any further questions, then write them in the comments. And I always go back to the video and I answer every single question. So feel free to write whatever you want, as many questions as you'd like. Let's keep the discussion going. And if you want to learn more, find out more about the Book of Zohar in general, about developing in spirituality and Kabbalah, then I highly recommend you check out KabU. In KabU, in our KabU membership, you'll also find the course, Enter the Zohar, and many other courses there on a variety of topics. So, highly recommended. And with that, we'll conclude today's session. So, I'm Gil Shir. Today we spoke about the history of the Book of Zohar. And Thank you all very much, and we'll see you next time.